Welcome everyone. We have an awesome, diverse group today, and I'm very excited to listen to Marion's presentation. She just finished another presentation the previous hour, so she is making the rounds today. So my name is Megan Dettenmeyer. I'm the Forestry Extension Educator here at Utah State University, and one of my favorite parts of my jobs is finding interesting speakers, much like Marion, to present to our diverse audience. Marion has been the IPM project leader at Utah State University since 2006. She conducts outreach and research in integrated pest management of fruits and landscape ornamentals, and she distributes seasonal pest advisories to thousands of producers and professionals in Utah. I think the size and the diversity of our group today really speaks to the breadth of knowledge of Marion, and I'm really excited that she volunteered to give our webinar today. Please take a minute at the end of this talk to take our very quick 3-question poll. We like to evaluate our program, and when we're constantly striving to improve our delivery of the science and our outreach. Next month, please mark your calendars for April 25th. We're going to have Rob McDonald from the Nature Conservancy. He just published a report called Planting Trees for Air, and it's a great report, and I'm very excited to have him. So April 25th, mark your calendar. So with that, I will hand it over to Marion, and thank you.
Thank you, Megan, and congrats to you for such a great webinar program. I looked at some of your past programs or presentations, and I feel a little intimidated because they've been so awesome. So we'll see how this goes. All right, I'm going to do a little something different here. Within this presentation, I've got some pictures of plants, and I figured, well, why not see how many people can identify what they are? And that'll be something that you'll just do on the side in chat, and Megan will monitor that, and she'll post what they are as we go. So this one is, I'll tell you what this is. It's super easy. Pussy willow, you know, they're blooming now or getting ready to bloom, depending on where you are. All right, so I'll be covering abiotic issues on urban trees. So starting out with, you know, how can you tell abiotic versus something that's caused by a plant pathogen or insects. So by abiotic, I mean obviously non-living things, temperature, moisture, chemicals, etc. And of course, the damage is not going to spread from one plant to another, so it's non-infectious. Whereas biotic disorders can spread. They are infectious, so fungi, bacteria, etc. All right, in Utah, we have a Utah Plant Pest Diagnostic Lab. It's at the Utah State University. Every state should have a diagnostic lab. But ours, we get, I don't know, 300 or so samples a year. It's not that huge. But about 80% of them, the problem is an abiotic issue. So it really is pervasive with the urban landscape. Okay, so here's your first little ID test. What's the tree that has this flower? And again, you can just type that in chat. And I think Megan said she has a prize for someone, so she'll decide how she gives that out.
I do have a prize, and we already have like 8 correct answers, so okay. I'm very impressed.
Good. Well, we're starting easy. Some of them will get a little harder. Anyway, so diagnosing, obviously it's important. You don't want to misdiagnose or apply pesticide when it's not needed. So what are some tools that you might need? Well, when I'm out in the field, and I actually go to a lot of public spaces to do some monitoring, see what's out there. And these are the kinds of, this is the equipment that I'll carry with me. Hand lens, hope everyone has a hand lens to see little tiny structures. And I always have pruners and a saw. I'm sure people don't appreciate me chopping up the trees, but often you have to do that to see what's going on underneath the bark or to collect samples. So determining whether what you're looking at is an abiotic issue or caused by some living organism, there are certain cues that you can identify, or characteristics. So this example here is just foliage. So if you look at the foliage on the left, you can see those spots are various shapes. Well, they're mostly circular, various sizes actually. Some of those circular spots are blending in together and they have that yellow halo. So those are all indications or clues that this is probably caused by a living organism, fungus or bacteria. But on the right, you can see there's no yellow margin on those necrotic areas, those brown areas. And also you can see the leaf damage looks pretty symmetrical. The injury has somewhat of a pattern to it. So that would be indication that it's caused by abiotic factors. So any time you're doing diagnosing, you want to ask some questions, gather some intel. So look, what are the patterns? Where on the plant is being affected? Do the symptoms show up year after year, always at the same time? Are there other plants that are affected as well of a different species? So that would clue you into an abiotic issue. Is it happening in multiple locations? And then what has been the management history on that site? Has there been any construction? What's the weather been, etc.? So all that will help to get a good diagnosis. All right, so here's another ID to see if you guys know what this is. It's a shrubby, small tree, and I can grow in a variety of different temperate locations. All right, so the next topic here is how stress affects plants. And in general, healthy plants are going to have good growth, obviously, but their energy, their resources, sugar, is going to be partitioned into various factors evenly in the most optimal way. So growth, maintenance, storage, and of course, plant defenses. So where those resources or the energy is allocated, that's going to depend on, are there any stresses applied to that plant? Of course, the time of year, genetics, and the age of the plant. So here's just a crude diagram of how either low water or low nutrient availability may affect growth or photosynthesis. And it's going to affect growth much more so than photosynthesis. Growth is going to shut down more quickly, but the plant, of course, will still be making its own energy. So there are ways that trees can adapt to stresses. So trees that are under water stress are going to close the leaves, are going to close the stomates to prevent water loss. And the root to shoot ratio may increase, meaning that there will be more root growth searching for water and decreased foliage. Leaves will turn yellow and drop. Lack of sunlight, if you've been out hiking in the woods, you can tell that the leaves are going to be larger, thicker than if the tree's grown in the sun. And of course, the tree's going to lean towards the light. And then nitrogen, of course, that's going to slow growth down, smaller, thicker leaves. So trees have ways of adapting to stress. But the stress is going to be too much, and if it's going to be piled on top of other stress factors or even insects or disease, you'll run into what's called this mortality spiral. And the stress part that we're kind of focusing on here are these predisposing factors. And trees that are left without the stress remedied will turn in, follow this mortality spiral, and eventually there'll be no options for saving the tree. So what I'm going to show some examples of are issues with water, chemicals, physical mechanical factors, and soil. So I decided to break this up by causes rather than symptoms, but certainly as you have questions or something's going on, chime in, as Mark said. So we'll start with weather causes. Okay, here is your another, get your typing fingers ready for what this is, a shrub, mostly a eastern species.
Hey, Marion.
Yes.
So we had a question. Did you say you do want people to chime in and I can facilitate those questions now, or do you want to wait till the end?
Oh yeah, so I think if a question comes in, go ahead and interrupt me.
Okay.
And that way. Yeah.
Katie Wagner asked, is the decreased root to shoot rate also true due to water stress from too much water too frequently?
Too much water too frequently would really cause roots to not grow as well. So it's kind of a little bit of a different situation. And it's a good question. So I don't know if I'm really answering it correctly, but my guess would be that it would be a completely different scenario under excess water, because you have no oxygen and the roots really aren't able to grow so much. So
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so there's that shrub. So weather causes. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the next few minutes. Cold temperature injury. So as foliage emerges, temperatures drop. These are the kinds of symptoms that you might see. On the left there is an aspen affected by frost. So just tightly curled foliage. And a lot of times that foliage is going to turn black. So it's pretty easy to identify this type of cold injury on the brand new foliage. Sometimes the injury can happen while the tree is still in bud. And if just as the leaves are breaking bud and hard frost temperatures can cause slight damage within the bud. And as those leaves emerge, they almost take on a tattered appearance, or they'll be a little crinkled or malformed. And of course, the next flush of foliage is going to be normal. So it's not really going to affect the health of the tree, but that's typically when you see these types of injury on the foliage, you might suspect early frost injury in the bud. So sometimes that injury can happen over winter as well. There's been several years, at least here in Utah, where we have had real warm falls, where the trees haven't really had a chance to go out of dormancy completely. So the warm temperatures in fall, even up to Thanksgiving, and a sudden precipitous drop in temperature to the point where it's going to cause some injury to the plant. And sometimes on conifers, that injury can be at the very top of the tree, and it may resemble something like Ips damage or white pine weevil. But if you're going to see that across different species or kind of in a line, then you'll know that that's definitely winter injury. But also on evergreens, conifers, it's pretty common to see this type of desiccation injury where the tree, there may be some wind, warm winds, and the tree is transpiring but unable to replace that lost water. And so you'll have this necrotic areas on the previous year's foliage. But a lot of times you'll see the area on needles, conifers, closer to the stem is always going to be green. The leaves and needles are dying from the top down. So giant sequoia here is one example that can be sensitive to that type of winter desiccation injury. Again, especially if the soil is dry as it goes into the winter season. And again, the roots can't really take up any water. There's no water available. But the new growth coming out, be green and healthy, and eventually cover up that necrotic area. Okay, so another weather-related issue with trees are frost cracks. And these occur because of temperatures that heat and cool suddenly or over time, and the bark expands and contracts. And with that sudden change in temperature, that expansion and contraction is uneven, and it causes that splitting in the bark. And the splitting or the injury can be as little as a few millimeters to centimeters into the bark, or it can be all the way into the center of the tree until it's basically a loud boom with the tree cracks open. So this type of injury where it's just the outer bark, eventually it's going to heal, and the shedding or loose bark could be carefully cut out. But sometimes that injury will happen year after year after year in the same place, and the tree calluses over, and then it happens again, the tree calluses. So in the interior of the tree sort of looks like this, where you get this kind of raised callus along one edge. And that is nothing you can do about. It's just a matter of the tree needing to heal itself and stay healthy. But here's an example of where that frost crack could happen all the way into the center of the tree.
Marion, Daniel Allen has a question about frost. Has anyone ever seen frost damage in the forest, or have you?
In the forest, yeah, that can happen, particularly on conifers, new growth coming out, spruce, hemlock, where that new growth is very sensitive, and low pockets or some areas where that frost is going to hit, the new growth can just curl up and turn brown. But as far as this type of injury with the frost cracks, etc., not as common because of the shading and the regulation of the bark temperature is a little bit better in forested situations.
And Cynthia had a quick question about the difference between winter damage and salt damage. If you're going to get to that, we can put that off, but I just...
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about salt damage.
Perfect.
It might be a little difficult to tell the two apart, so we'll get to that. All right, so also on the lines of winter injury is what some people call southwest injury or sunscald. Now what happens is this is similar to frost cracking, but different type of injury. So it's the side of the tree facing the southwest, and that's where the most intense heat of late winter will happen on the bark. And if there's snow on the ground, there's going to be reflected heat, so it'll be even worse. So there may be a warm day on that side of the tree during late winter that heats up the bark, and some of those cells in the bark deharden or go out of dormancy. And then that night, the temperature may drop to very extreme cold conditions. And what happens is that those cells that have come out of dormancy then are killed. And so there's an area of that side of the tree where the bark eventually dies. And sometimes it may take 2 years or so before you actually see the effects of the dead bark. It may take that long for the callousing to happen. But southwest injury is a huge problem, of course, in the west where we have these bright, sunny conditions in late winter. So the trees, they're able to heal over time. One of the problems with these types of injuries, the frost crack and the southwest injury, is that they are predisposed to attack by decay fungi, such as shown there on the left. And the fungi get into the wood of the tree, compromise the structure, or it may be an area where flat-headed borers really like to attack. So anyway, predisposes trees to these other conditions or attacks. So prevention is the biggest point to remember for southwest injury. And that is, the easiest way to do is, of course, pick the right site for planting the tree where it's not going to get that type of sunlight. But if it does, or if it's a very thin barked tree, then just buying white tree wrap and wrapping that around the tree from December or so until April. So you don't want to leave it on all year round. Wrap it during those months for about 3 or 4 years until that bark gets more thick and more resistant to sunscald injury. All right, so switching, we're still under weather, but I decided to put water in that category. Issues with water stress, drought, or too much water often have the same symptoms: a thinning crown, yellowing or scorching leaf drop, etc. And there's all kinds of evidence that shows what trees under water stress, of course, are not going to be as vigorous, not going to grow as well, and will have smaller leaves. The other thing about drought stress is that, just like I mentioned with sunscald, it predisposes plants to other issues. And the best example is conifers. They're susceptible to bark beetle attack. They really like to attack trees under stress. So these trees hadn't received any water for a few years and now are slowly being killed by bark beetles. All right, so acute drought stress, easy to identify, especially on the new foliage coming out. It's just wilted and curled under, so easy to identify, best to prevent. But that acute symptoms from drought stress can also be seen later in the season. We've actually seen this a lot the last few years where I live in Utah, where we've had some springs that have been nice and wet, lots of moisture, and then it's almost like around June 15 or so, the water faucet just gets shut off to nothing for the rest of the summer. And so you can imagine the trees having to adjust from that full, lush foliage to no moisture to able to sustain that foliage. And so the trees then shed their leaves, they turn yellow, and even things out. And so I've gotten a lot of calls the last couple of years about this sudden yellow leaf coloration and leaf drop. So that's really, again, a normal part of the tree's ability to adapt. All right, chronic drought stress, of course, many years is going to lead to dieback and decline. And on conifers, shown there in the middle, we typically see that with dieback from the bottom up, especially on the blue spruces, and especially on trees that are in competition, say with ground cover or turf. That's where we're going to see the worst effects from drought stress. So other symptoms kind of related to drought stress is scorching of the foliage. And I do want to point out that scorch happens when there's an uneven balance between the roots and the tree. So if there's been some construction and severe root loss, but the tree you feel like is still getting enough water, it's because of that imbalance that's happening. The leaves are transpiring, giving off water on the hot days, and there's not enough from the roots to absorb into the foliage to replace that lost water. So sometimes the scorch on some species is from the top down, that type of pattern. And on other species like maple on the right, and that's horse chestnut on the left, is marginal. So we call that marginal necrosis. But you can see, obvious, it's a pattern, very symmetric type injury there. Was there a question, Megan?
Yeah, there was a question. Are more species more susceptible to Sunscald, and how does the age of a specific tree impact that risk?
Yeah, so what species are more susceptible? I've actually seen scorch in Utah on dozens and dozens of different species. I'm trying to think of some that I've not seen it on. I mean, I've seen it on maple, dogwood, lilac might be one that's not as susceptible, but that's a good question. I would say just about every species has the potential to have this type of symptom. And larger trees would be more susceptible because, of course, they have larger root mass and crown mass to be sustained. So younger trees are not going to be as susceptible to scorch because of that, the smaller ratio. So I hope that answers that question. All right, other examples of scorch. That's tulip poplar on the top left. That was the flower that you saw earlier. And then oak on the right and on the bottom left there. So that type of injury, the scorch injury on these species, is in between the veins. So we call that interveinal necrosis. So really the take-home point with scorch here is that it's a pattern, typically symmetrical, and it can be top down, around the edges, or in between the veins, okay? On conifers, it's typically from the top of the needle down. And so I've already shown some winter injury on conifers, winter desiccation. There's also summertime scorch, and then there's the salt injury too, which I'll get to in a sec. And they all look the same. But I do want to say on the right here, there you can see in that picture there's a little bit of pitch or gumming oozing from those needles. There is a foliar disease of conifers called red band or dothostroma, and that's the type of symptom you would see with that foliar disease. But we could not culture anything out of these leaves or these needles, and concluded that this was just a scorch injury here, just showing similar symptoms to a foliar disease. All right, so I mentioned scorch is just an imbalance between the roots and the foliage, and it's exacerbated when there's reflection from buildings, sidewalks, and also when trees are really growing, the roots are constricted to tight spaces. And of course, when trees are not getting enough moisture, period. So this tree growing in right in the middle of the turf. The turf is getting enough water in some areas, but not enough water is getting to the roots of the tree. So this is something I want you guys, if anyone has any knowledge about this, to chime in on chat. This is honey locust, and for the past 2 years, we've gotten some emails about this symptom. So this oozing along the trunk of honey locusts. And I know folks in Colorado have also seen these symptoms on trees there. And it's really, we've concluded that it's attributed to drought stress. But I just think it's such an unusual symptom. And again, I'm curious to see if anyone has any insight into what's going on. You know, what's the physiology behind this? If you look under the bark of these oozing areas, the tissue underneath is still cream colored. So it's no canker, it's no disease, it's no insects. All right, so here the point I want to make is excess water is just as bad as not enough water. On the right there, that pine tree, ponderosa pine that's down lower on that bank, was planted the same time as the pine trees up higher. But because it's on the bottom of the slope, it's been getting too much water, and it has not been able to grow nearly as well as the other trees. So, of course, excess water deprives roots of oxygen and prevents that growth. So, of course, to keep plants from getting scorched or affected by drought stress is obviously watering optimally. This picture of that variegated beech, someone emailed me and said, oh, I water this tree 10 minutes every other day, and it's not looking good. And so it was kind of obvious what the problem was. So plenty of water is important. Mulching, there's so many trees growing in turf, and so getting rid of that turf and having mulch instead is going to help a huge amount. And just make sure if it's automatic irrigation that it's wetting the entire root zone of that tree. And trees that are grown in competition with ground covers and others are going to need more water in the irrigation. And also trees in heat islands have been shown to require about 50% more water. And of course, periodic moisture testing. Okay. Any questions come up, Megan?
Yeah. Is it damaging to a tree to water it in the heat of the day? That's just a simple question.
Okay, it's not damaging to the tree, but it's more efficient in terms of water usage to water it in the morning or have your setting at night if you're just watering the root zone. Yeah, because of the heat of the day, there'll be evaporation.
Right. Lisa had asked a simple question: how much would you recommend watering for trees, and how often? And I imagine that depends on the species, the temperature, and lots of other variables. But
yeah. So that really depends. That could be maybe a question you could email me later for something maybe more specific, or maybe Megan can help you out through chat.
Yeah.
Anything else?
There were just some couple comments about that damage. Was it a honey locust?
Oh, said? Okay. Yeah.
There wasn't really any insight other than Chicago region has seen an increase in Necria canker on honey locusts. Many of them are in decline in that Nectria in that area.
Okay. Okay. All right.
That was the one comment on the honey locust. Is that pitch that it's, what is that?
Yes, I know. Okay. It might be hard to tell from the pictures, but yeah, that's a gumming coming from the tree is exuding, and so it's something that we'll have to look into. Is
the tree healthy otherwise besides during this time when it's suffering in this way?
Yeah, the foliage is green. I'm sure the tree is somewhat has a thin crown, but the tree's not dying. So,
Okay.
yeah. All right.
We had one other question. If you could just define what exactly is a heat island?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. A heat island would be an area, say, this would be more of an urban example where the trees are growing in a planting bed, maybe a raised planting bed surrounded by concrete, or parking lot, or a parking strip. So just areas that maybe don't have as much root area to grow in, and that are surrounded by cement. All right, so this picture, here's another chat question. Does anyone have any thoughts on what might have caused this injury? It doesn't really matter what the tree is, but it's a peach. So any thoughts, type in chat. It's just little random chlorotic areas.
You're right, it's getting harder.
Okay, well, this is just wind, actually, just wind injury. And it would be easier, of course, if you were looking at the whole tree, but every single leaf had this damage. And so that made it obvious. Oh, it's definitely not a disease, definitely not insects, because every leaf had this similar pattern of injury. And it was just wind blowing up sand, causing that surface injury. Okay, so here's the next plant. You can identify, what is this tree? So now I'm going to switch to talk about chemical causes. So by that I mean maybe some injury due to herbicides or to misapplication of pesticides. And one thing I want to make sure is that you understand what this word is: phytotoxicity. So that means chemical injury to a plant. So the phytotoxic response to the plant material. Okay. All right, so here is one example. And this I actually see a fair amount. This injury is from just applying horticultural oil. And oil is a great insecticide for aphids, spider mites, and others. But when it's applied, when the temperatures are too hot, then you can get this phytotoxic injury. And it's easy to tell it's not a disease because, again, those spots are pretty almost the same size, and there's no yellow margin around them. So horticultural oil injury. This injury is caused by application of malathion, also in relation to application when it's too hot and probably at too high of a rate. On the left picture there, it looks like the material just kind of dripped down the mid-vein of that leaf and dripped to the leaf below. So those are also all good indications of some misapplication of a pesticide. So here's an example that actually took a little time to try and figure out. This is on peach, and it was actually on a few different sites in one city where the foliage had these types of symptoms that actually looks exactly like a disease that affects peach trees called coronium blight or shot hole. The symptoms showed up at a time of year when we wouldn't typically see this disease. So it took a lot of investigating and trying to get some questions answered. And so we found out, well, really it was just the application of a fungicide called Chlorothalonil, again, when it was too hot and at too high of a rate. But here the symptoms really mimic an actual foliar disease. All right, herbicide injury is another one I'm sure a lot of you see as well.
We had a quick question about horticulture oil.
Okay.
And how is its toxicity influenced by sunlight? Is it increased?
Well, the toxicity is influenced more by heat. So sunlight, if you're spraying it on a sunny day, but the temperatures are still below about 85 degrees might be the threshold, you might not necessarily see some injury. Really, what we recommend if you're going to use oil is that it within the next 4 hours of application, the temperature should not be above 85 degrees, and then you shouldn't see any phytotoxic injury. Okay, so it's more the heat. All right, so herbicide injury. So here's an example of injury from Roundup or glyphosate, and it was applied to weeds the year before in the late summer and probably landed on some suckers and the tree took it up. But the injury from glyphosate is characteristic with these thin, strappy leaves and excessive growth at the terminals. And of course, real chlorotic growth as well. This on the right is glyphosate injury from the current season, where leaves are very small, not quite as strappy, and again, chlorotic.
Katie Wagner had a question. Oh, you're going to talk about it. Never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, the trunk cracking.
Okay. Now, I bet a lot of you already know about this. So there was some research, I don't remember where it was out of, but it was several years ago, where people noticed container-grown plants, they were starting to see some cracking on the bark, and did some investigations and found that the issue was the application of glyphosate plus surfactant applied late in the season, and some drift would land on the bark, and the surfactant would allow the glyphosate to somewhat penetrate the bark, and it caused that area of the bark tissue to be more susceptible to winter injury, i.e. winter cracking. So here's an example here where glyphosate's been used year after year on the ground, and it's anytime after, say, July, or maybe a little bit later, mid-July or so, where this could possibly happen. So some of that landed on the bark, and you got that cracking. So again, it's the glyphosate plus the surfactant effect. So turf herbicides are cause effect to the foliage of a lot of different landscape trees. Dicamba or 2,4-D, often they're mixed together. And the effect is usually caused two ways. One might be actual drift of the material, but more often it's when the herbicide is applied on a hot day. So here again, we're getting with this heat, and you get the volatile of the material that then affects the foliage. And so it may happen and you don't even realize you're applying it very carefully, you have no drift, but with the heat you can still have these effects of injury. And it's the curling, upward cupping of the foliage is one example. That's a linden on the left and a lilac on the right. Or the effect could be curling under, and this is a redbud. And redbud is kind of like the poster child or the a test of the real effects of turf herbicides. Very, very sensitive. So the other effect is the veins become parallel, and they clear out. Essentially, they become chlorotic. And it's surprising how far the herbicides can drift. So this was, someone emailed me, it's a calorie pear, and it has the classic herbicide symptoms, but she had not applied any herbicides. None of their neighbors had applied them. So after she did some investigating, found out the field on the left, that picture there, that field way in the background, they had applied herbicides there the prior fall. And so that, I guess there was just some drift at the time they applied. So you can see that really can affect a wide range. So this was an elm that was sent into the diagnostic lab caused by a pre-emergent herbicide that works by inhibiting photosynthesis, like simazine, triazine. And so that also clears out the veins, leaves that necrotic area of the vein tissue. And here's an example. I think most of us probably have an example like this, where, so I got a call, come look at my cottonwoods or poplar trees, and has these type of symptoms where really it just looks like scorch almost, but the tissue is blackened. And after some prodding and soothing questions, the owner finally admitted that she had applied soil sterilant along the street to take care of some suckers for this tree. Obviously, soil sterilants are not allowed anymore by homeowner use, but I guess there's still some out there. All right, so remedying any herbicide injury is more a matter of just waiting, being patient. Sometimes you can incorporate some organic matter to try and absorb certain herbicides. Deep irrigation could help with soluble herbicides, but keep in mind that you're also washing it away as well. But keeping tree in optimal health, often these trees they'll grow out of it. It may take a year or two for that to happen, but often if it's not too bad, they'll be able to recover. As far as pollutant injury, the only thing I have seen is injury.
I'm going to interrupt you before we move on. I have a couple lawn chemical questions in the Q&A. So, have you seen damage from granular lawn chemicals, dust drift too close to trees and beds? Granular lawn chemicals.
Oh, granular dust drift? Is that what you said?
Yeah, granular lawn chemicals or dust drift.
I haven't seen dust drift. I think the more of the injury for lawn chemicals has been with the liquid applied.
Okay.
But as far as the granular, that's a little bit safer because it isn't volatilized and it pretty much stays in place.
Okay. There was another question and I'm not able to find it, but
okay.
Oh, somebody asked a question. Randy asked, will these trees recover from the chemical drift damage? And I think your last slide just said you have to wait it out.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, so I was saying, as far as pollutant injury, or did you have? Was there another question, Megan?
There was another one. Just how can I fertilize the tree on my lawn without damaging? How can I fertilize my turf without damaging my tree? But I don't know where that question went. So.
Okay. Yeah. Fertilizing your turf shouldn't harm the tree.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right. Ozone damage is when, ozone as a result of auto car pollution. And where I live in Utah, we often have these areas, valley areas, where this pollution gets trapped. And conifers can be affected by that type of pollution. So this is ozone damage on ponderosa pine with the stippling, necrotic banding. All right, so moving on. So that's the end of the chemical injury and physical mechanical causes. So this tree here, it's a Japanese native species. Feel free to type in chat if you want to guess what it is. It's a beautiful tree. Okay. So I just want to point two examples of some physiological disorders that you wouldn't really consider disease, but I did want to just point them out. One is often if you're hiking in the woods or other places, you might see these burls on conifers, and those are just a mutation or maybe a branch bud that never formed fully and kind of turned inward on itself. There's a lot of different causes for these burls, but they usually don't harm the health of the tree and often make some very fine-looking wood. This is another physiological disorder. It's a mutation at the bud area, the apical meristem tissue. And what it's called is fasciation. That's F-A-S-C, fasciation. If I were to cut out that branch, this injury or this symptom would not show up anywhere else. It's localized here, and like I said, it's just a physiological mutation. So that's another one that's quite interesting to look at. But anyway, so the main ways you can harm or kill a tree is planting it too deep or not taking care of girdling roots. So trees that are planted too deep are going to obviously not do well in the landscape. The roots need oxygen, so that deep planting is going to prevent oxygen from getting to the roots. And the tree itself will grow slowly and die back over time. And there's been a lot of research. This is an old project from 2006 where the scientists planted maple and cherry, And some of them were planted at 6 inches too deep and some at about a foot too deep. And most of the cherry trees died. The maple trees survived, but later in their lives, they had real problems with girdling roots. So planting depth obviously has a big effect on the health of the tree. For example, this tree was buried in 12 inches of soil for about 7 years. And eventually you see those roots, they don't get oxygen, they slowly die back, and the tree failed in a storm. So planting depth, girdling roots, I feel like are the two biggest issues with landscape trees. Here on the left, that's a Austrian pine. And then in the background is another Austrian pine. You can see the difference in the crown between the two. One is very thin. So the base of that tree, the foreground tree, has this girdling root around the trunk. And so you can see the kinds of effects that that can have on the growth of a tree. And another example, this is a little leaf linden in the front there. Again, thin crown, smaller leaves than little leaf lindens should have. Very slow growth. Compared to on the right of that little leaf linden is another one that's healthy. So at the base of that declining tree, this is what the girdling roots look like. So it's something that needs to be taken care of very early in the growth of the tree. And it happens, girdling roots happen when they're planted, say you plant a tree in a hole that's too small and the soil is very compact. The biggest issue is with container-grown trees. They already have circling roots, so not dealing with that before planting can cause lots of issues later down the road. Bare root trees, if you purchase a bare root tree, you're going to plant those, make sure you plant them with the roots going as they are in their normal position rather than wrapping it around and around to a small hole. And then wire baskets, burlap, twine, etc. can help contribute to girdling roots.
Marion, I'm asking a selfish question here.
Okay.
I have a Norway maple in my planting strip, and it clearly has girdling roots. Anything I can do?
Yeah, so take a look at this example I'm going to show you. Okay, so this was the tree. Since you admitted yours, I'll admit mine. This is a tree in my yard, although I didn't plant this tree. It's after I bought the house. And I noticed, yeah, it has these girdling roots. And so an arborist came, and so the remedy is to do what's called a root collar excavation. And that can be done with a shovel or even an air spade to reveal all the problem roots. So this is the picture on the top and the bottom are showing two different sides of the tree. And so this arborist cut out the worst roots, and typically about 6-inch diameter might be the biggest you'd want to go in terms of cutting out those roots. So for that Norway maple, you could get a professional to do it, or if you're comfortable yourself, you could try and do this root collar excavation.
Or I can ask my boss, Mike Coons.
I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. So here was that honey locust. That's what the tree was. Here it was before the root collar excavation. You can see the crown starting to thin out, tree not doing so well. And this is about 2 years after. This is a different angle, but the tree became a lot healthier. It's important to, after that excavation, water carefully, maybe 2 years later or so, fertilize. There will be some dieback in the tree as it adjusts, but that would be, one of the best things that you could do to help save the tree. All right, another tree ID here. This is a southern eastern native species, so you probably would not see it in the western United States. Some soil issues with the soil. Nutrient deficiencies would be one of the most common things we see in the West because our soils are highly alkaline. So iron deficiency, zinc, manganese, and nitrogen. And they can occur on hardwoods and conifers. So iron deficiency symptoms would be just the chlorotic foliage itself. Sometimes the veins will remain green. And when the deficiency is severe, you can also see some scorch associated with that iron deficiency. And I'll talk about remedying this in a sec. Manganese deficiency occurs as necrotic areas in between the veins and works its way from the top of the leaf down. And it looks somewhat similar to zinc deficiency, but the deficiency is a little bit more bleached in appearance. It's still between the veins, a little more random, but also on the lower right, you can see that branch there with some missing leaves. That's called blind wood, and that's another symptom of zinc deficiency. All right, so it's almost obvious that to remedy a nutrient deficiency is, of course, to apply that nutrient. But you want to get a soil test to see what is the problem. In Utah, it's the Utah State Analytical Lab, and I'm sure there's a analytical lab, a soil lab in a lot of other states as well. So be sure and get a soil test, and you can talk to them about how to collect the soil sample. For iron, which is, like I said, very common in the West, the only option is applying chelated iron in the spring. And the most important timing is before bud break. And I've given an example there of one brand, Miller's FerroPlus. So it needs to be chelated so the iron can be available for uptake and not affected by the soil pH. All right, so here's the salt injury and saline soils. So what's shown here is injury from actual salt application to sidewalks or to the road. Salt spray comes and really affects conifers more so than hardwoods, but it's pretty easy diagnosis to make. But saline soils is a little bit more difficult to diagnose unless you get a soil sample done. So what happens in the West is low irrigation, compacted soils, and the heat and the arid environment cause salts to build up on the soil surface and within the soil itself. And that actually prevents uptake of water. It prevents uptake of nutrients. And sometimes when the salt concentration is so high, the plant actually takes the salt up itself. So there in the middle, you can see that this is a Mondale pine, has been affected by salt injury. And it does look a little different from the scorch I showed you in the winter desiccation, in that the needles are getting a little twisted, very brittle as well. Whereas the scorch injury, the needles still are pretty firm. And over time, so the Mondale tree on the right, there can be dieback with that repeated effects of the saline soils.
Marion, how would you, somebody had a question about a zinc deficiency. How would you remedy that, or zinc?
Yeah, so that would be, for the most part, foliar application of zinc. And I didn't mention, so you can get soil samples, but you can also get foliar samples as well. And that might be the case where you're not sure what the nutrient deficiency is, that you would want to do both. So once you get the sample analyzed, then the lab can tell you how much to apply and whether it should be soil or foliar applied. So, all right, saline soils is a problem when, again, the soil becomes compacted. So improving the drainage by cultivating the soil can help a bit. Doing a deep irrigation can help flood some of that salt out. In some cases, gypsum can be used. And again, that would be a matter of what the analytical lab, what the results came back to recommend. So I just have a few, we only have 6 more minutes or so I'm almost done if you just bear with me. One thing about compacted soil is obvious to identify, but I wanted to point out sometimes it's associated with these bleeding cankers. And it's actually caused by a pathogen called Phytophthora cactorum, where because the soil is so compacted, any rain that falls just going to splash up onto the bark, and that pathogen can actually build up in that soil and cause these bleeding cankers. So whenever I've seen compacted soil, often I've seen these bleeding cankers associated with that. And this type of radial trenching, air blasting that soil away and replacing it with less dense soil or mulch, can help remedy that compacted soil. All right, so I want to finish up with 2 sample diagnoses here. And here's one more picture if you guys want to try and figure out what this is. These are the drupes of the flowers themselves. Okay, so this is not an urban tree, but it'll give a good example. This is an apricot orchard, and the grower contacted us with these trees that had yellowing leaves, curling leaves, and the symptoms were pretty much throughout the whole area. So we really had an idea that's definitely not caused by a disease or an insect. Again, the leaves were tightly curling up and turning this, or senescing, chlorotic, and a lot of leaf drop. And the other interesting symptom was this pattern on the veins of the leaves that's actually edema. It showed up like this type of symptom on some leaves, and this type of corky brown bumps on some other leaves. So edema is when the tree takes up too much water and stores it. So what we guessed was the problem was that the soil was too salty. It was saline. And so he submitted some samples to the analytic lab. And I just wanted to point out that soil salinity is measured by electrical conductivity, and it's expressed in this DS per M. That's decisiemens per meter. So the apricot guideline or level for decline is about 1.6. That's the point at which you would start to see some symptoms or poor growth. And this grower's soil was at 4. So definitely had high salts in the soil, and the tree was taking that up. And what had happened was that he had flood irrigation, and he had switched to drip about 7 years prior. And it was in that 7-year period that caused these salts to build up. So the recommendation was to flood every few months. And the trees did improve. All right, so quickly, this last tree, it's a Quanzon cherry. You can see the tree in the front is not leafing out as well as the tree in the back. And so the main stress factor, this is the base of the root collar of the tree. It's planted too deep, as you can see. It's in the turf, and the soil is a little bit at a lower level around the tree. So the water is collecting there. So it's getting too much water, and it's planted too deep. And it is under stress. Trees that are not doing well will send out this epicormic growth. So it's doing that. It had some foliar diseases. This is shot hole. It had cankers. This is bacterial canker. So a lot of oozing on the trunk. It also had shot hole borers, and it had flat-headed borers. And the final death blow to this tree was crown rot caused by Phytophthora. So this is just an example of the mortality spiral, where this tree had the predisposing factors, the inciting factors, and then contributing factors. So, all right, well, that went kind of long, but I'm glad you guys had some questions. Were there any more questions that came in, Megan?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of questions we haven't got to. I have a question about that spiral, the mortality spiral.
Okay.
And Mark, if you wouldn't mind launching that poll, that'd be awesome. Did you create that that image?
Oh, the diagram?
Yeah, the diagram.
No, I didn't.
Okay. It's very interesting. Okay, so if you want to open up your Q&A pod, you'll see the questions there, and they kind of go in the order of that we weren't able to answer them, address them. So you can start from the bottom or start from the top, depending on your availability to stick around and answer questions. So again, if folks have to leave, I certainly appreciate you guys tuning in, and please take the poll. And if you would like to stick around for Q&A. Go for it.
Oh, so Megan, should I, if I click on answer live, does that mean?
That's just going to remove it. That'll remove it from the ask column and put it over in the answered column. So once, if you know it's been answered or you're about to answer it, then you can click that.
Then click it. Okay, so I'll start from the bottom. Isn't it caused by phytoplasma? I'm not sure what that question was in relation to, so I'm going to click that one. The next one, fasciation. Typically, I guess it could be caused by a virus or bacteria, but then you would see it in more locations on the plant. It could also be caused by herbicides as well. But when it's just in one area, typically it's just a mutation within the plant. Have you ever seen fluoride gas damage? No? Well, I take that back. My boss had seen fluoride gas damage years and years ago when there was actual, I don't know what the chemical plant was in Salt Lake City, and then it's been closed and shut down. So I'm not answering that question very good. But yes, it can occur if there's emissions. Let's see, do you not recommend pre-emergent on grass in early spring? So, no, I think that's fine. I think that example I showed was just a misapplication of the product, probably got into the roots of that particular tree. Granular weed and feed on aspen suckers. Define the injury. So that would mean, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just definite injury. That was a comment or a question. Yeah.
I didn't read it right. Okay, yes, definite injury. Okay. Can parallel venation be caused by mites, aphids too? No, typically it cannot. Parallel venation may be caused by virus or some other phytoplasma or vector disease. Okay, oil injury, can it injure the buds? Okay, yeah, on evergreens, oil application. No, it can, as far as I know, it's not going to injure the buds unless the temperatures are below about 45 degrees is kind of the threshold that we recommend. So if it's applied before 45 degrees or below 45 degrees, there could be some bud injury. On evergreens, it can be used. If you're going to use it on, say, Colorado blue spruce, it's going to take away the blue bloom. Okay, moving on. Are there nice specimens of the Davidia, the dove tree, in the Salt Lake City area? I don't know if Katie Wagner is still on. Maybe she can answer in chat. So I'm actually not sure. I got that picture from where I worked before in Rhode Island. Does wind injury happen if it's only in the winter with no leaves? So I guess by wind injury you mean scorch. And I mean, wind injury can happen year round. So I guess I'm not sure of what that's meant by, Megan. I mean, wind injury can happen anytime.
Yeah. I mean,
okay. All right.
You're the expert.
Okay, got that. It's just a comment. Frost cracking versus Sunscald versus Southwest injury. Sunscald and Southwest side injury are the same thing. And then frost cracking is when you get that split in the wood or in the bark. So they're somewhat similar, but they're both caused by the variation in temperature extremes. Okay, and then frost cracking, do they follow the rays or the, yeah, they follow the grain of the wood? Yes, the frost cracks do.
If you scroll down, there's 2 more questions that just popped in from Clifford and Phil.
Okay, so Clifford, what is known concerning the effect of dicamba or 2,4-D on the root zone? I honestly can't answer that question. It's not a systemic, I hope I'm saying, so it wouldn't be absorbed by the roots. Anyone, Megan, can you chime in or not? It's more of a foliar effect.
I am not an expert on that in any way, shape, or form, but we still have 113 people here, and I'm sure somebody has something to say about it. So,
Wow. Okay. Yeah, maybe someone could say, is Dicamba 2,4-D ever affect roots?
And then I'm not seeing anybody yet, but I'll give them a second.
Okay. All right. So this is a question about fruit trees. Sudden weather. When should I begin spraying my apple and peach trees with dormant oil? So that's a answer that you have to make yourself. You should apply dormant oil on your fruit trees or even your landscape trees. The best timing is when the buds start to swell and you just see the leaves coming out. So really you have to make that determination by looking at the buds on your own tree. From Kansas City, how cold does it have to get day, night for 1 inch? Yeah, I think that might be a question to just Google. I don't know off the top of my head the critical temperature for sweet gum flowers. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Dicamba, yes.
At the extension conference last week, we were encouraged to download the IPM subscription email notification that we can get in Utah that sort of notifies folks of when insects are emerging. And can you, I'm going to put that link up there. Can you speak to that and just explain a little bit about what it is?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So it's the IPM pest, the portal where people can subscribe to receive notifications when insects are coming out.
Yeah, I forgot to put a slide in about that.
It's okay, I just put the link in the chat.
All right, so go to that link. There'll be a button that says subscribe. So it's a newsletter through March to October or so, maybe every other week. So there's one for ornamentals, one for fruit. So if you'd like to receive that, yeah, we do mention what pests to look for, you know, at that time of year and how to treat. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, and somebody, Diana DeYoung, said, yes, dicambia can be uptaken by the roots.
Thank you.
Lots of good knowledge still with us.
Great. Snow damage. Well, what we tell people is that after heavy snows, get out there with a broom and get it off the trees. Yeah, pruning, you mentioned snow damage to prevent it, keeping the crown a little bit thinner. So I think we've gotten all the questions.
I think we have.
Yeah.
And yeah, Wayne also just chimed in, yes, dicambia can be root absorbed especially, or the question is rate and how tightly the herbicides stick to the soil. It's a bigger problem in sandy soils. So we did a good job. Thanks a lot, Marion. Thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks.
If you haven't taken, we will be in touch, and please mark your calendars for April 25th for our next webinar, Planting Healthy Air with Rob McDonald from the Nature Conservancy. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and taking time out of your busy day. So have a good one.
Thank you.
See everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Marion. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.